Oh, I know a grandpa isn't supposed to have favorites, but just between you and me, you're something really special, my little podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography. My name is Pierce Leiden, pronouns they, them. Here with, as always,
George Marston, pronouns they, them, or she, her. How the living fuck are you, Pierce?
Well, I'm disappointed.
Anything that starts off with
reality.
well.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
I was saying to you off mic, I'm reading the New York Times article about people being surprised that voting for Donald Trump didn't work out the way that they thought. And it's a clear misunderstanding of just how society works, specifically taxes.
Well, here's the thing. It's the same problem with us going into Iran and getting embroiled in a endless morass of stupid, senseless violence in a war for God and oil. Literally, they thought, and this is not me just projecting, there is no question that, like, fucking Pete, Secretary of War, Hegseth, and Donald, I'd piss myself daily, Trump, fucking, they thought they got so jazzed up, Stephen Miller, all of them, thinking like, we're going to go in and we're going to do an alpha war. We're going to cut through the red tape, cut through the bullshit, and just do what should have been done a long time ago and just fucking big dog this. And now they don't even, the troops, they're not even sending food. They didn't think about logistics. They literally thought, we'll just drop bombs and that'll be over in one night, which is literally what every country who has ever dropped bombs has thought since bombs were invented, and it has never once worked. This two-parter that we're about to read
we'll address that on some level.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki, of course, two cities deeply victimized by United States imperialism, because
thanks, Cillian
there
Murphy.
is a, what's that?
I said, thanks, Cillian Murphy.
Yeah, there is a political argument and a historical argument as to whether the Japanese were already going to surrender or whether the war was over.
Yeah.
But the fact is the Japanese government and army could no longer keep committing troops. And they were out of resources. So even if they planned to fight to the last person, which is probably not what would have happened, the war was likely already over or about to be over. And we dropped the bomb to prove we could. And because it was a precursor to our incoming war with quote unquote communism and socialism, the Cold War, because, and we're already into Georgia's special interest corner right now, and these two issues are not going to let up. But the stated foreign policy of the United States after World War II, because we wound up with about 60% of the world's wealth after World War II, because
and then we were like, that's good. We should do that again.
We were last in, first out with the treasure. And the foreign policy set through the second half of the 20th century, specifically the middle part of the 20th century, by the Dulles brothers, Secretary of State and leader of the CIA, head of the CIA, the Dulles brothers, was to keep as much of that wealth as possible at all costs, even if it meant the world would be destroyed by nuclear annihilation. And
that's how we've gotten back to where we are. And, nonpartisan take here. Every president has furthered this sort of strong arming of the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Even
no matter
Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. No matter their political affiliation, it's always been in service of hoarding wealth, which from the rest of the world by whatever means necessary.
Absolutely.
And it's I again, FBI agent that listens to the show, like obviously we're already on a list, so like it's fine.
Yeah,
You can put
going
your
to
pens
hell.
down.
They're
You
going to
already heard
gas us
this
through our
before.
phones or download an app that electrocutes us.
But like it's I find it crazy that people are surprised when they're like, oh my god, they're fighting back. I'm like, yeah, we just tried to bomb the
Dude.
hell out of them. What would you do?
Yeah, no, they don't again, they thought they were going to fucking go in there and be like, we're just going to do it. We're just going to do this the Chad way. We're just going to knock it out. Just going to do it without red tape. This is not a PC war. But they don't understand.
Well,
Pete
it's a
Hegseth
Mac
does
war.
not know what war is.
That's
Yeah,
he thinks it's Call of Duty. So
yes, none of them know. In Call of Duty, you don't have to carry rations. You don't have to establish supply chains. You don't have to establish perimeter. There's just, look, I hate and despise war, and we're going to get into a lot of war today,
sure,
and a lot about World War I, and I'm probably going to talk too much about it, but I despise the idea of, in general, using force to resolve conflicts that exist only because of greed and the hoarding of resources and wealth.
Agreed. I'm on the same page with you.
I am what you would call an anti-imperialist. It's crazy that the United States right now is trying to be both isolationist and interventionist, where it's like, no, we don't give anything to anyone. We're totally walled off. I mean, there is a certain political philosophy and system of government and era of political ambition. Again, we talked about it earlier, in a certain region of the world where that was exactly the policy, because that's what fascism is. It thinks it is a philosophy that thinks, first off, you can go it alone and do anything because you're superior, but has to convince itself simultaneously that there are enemies at every gate and they are strong enough, despite being inferior, to overwhelm our whole way of life. It's
so you need to be afraid of them, even though we're the best and we can destroy them at any time. We should be afraid of them. And it's it's the endless cycle of this sort of political moment we've been in for a long time, but political moment we're especially in now. I think like you can make the argument that like Joe Biden was a little bit better at hiding it. Now we just have like
well, he was nothing.
No, I know, but like comparatively,
well, that's why because he represented a kinder form of American sovereignty and American exceptionalism, which is what the
Democrats are always trading in, which is like the kinder version of fascism.
Right. We just don't say the slurs.
Yeah.
Which is why they'll never win over
there's a rainbow on our
wing.
Bombs.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why they'll never win over the right wing, because the right wing wants to say the slurs.
Right.
Why would they give up something they feel they've gotten the right to do in order to come off a way they don't care? Like, in order to avoid being seen as racist, which they don't care if they are.
Right. Well, because that's just another.
They crave the moment that someone calls them racist so that they can spout some fact or some turnabout or whatever. It's like the same reason. It is the equivalent thought process of thinking that like a trans person is going to correct you if you get their pronouns wrong in public and you're their waiter.
What's really funny is that like you and I have many trans friends, and like, it's
we're two trans friends of each other, really.
That's true. The two trans friends, but like the thing that is always very striking to me are the people who will trip over themselves to like apologize about like, and you kind of just go, oh, it would be way less weird if you were just less weird. Like, you can be just so much more chill and it's totally fine, because like,
I don't want to call attention to this. I don't want to have. I don't want to have a public spectacle around my gender.
I think that's always the big misunderstanding. It's like, I wish that like, and like, listen, I'm pretty stealthily trans, right? Like, I'm not like, people are not like, attempting to hate crime me in public. Right. That is a privilege that I enjoy that many trans people do not.
Absolutely.
That said, but that's even more the like, oh yeah, we don't need to. I had this conversation at work actually where somebody was like, do you use? And I was like, oh yeah. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, we're at work. I don't care.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not trying to make that my work struggle.
yeah, exactly. I would like to just clock in, clock out, get paid,
Go
and
home, not have
deal.
that conversation.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. And I think this is true for a lot of people who come out, to use that phrase, for a lot of different reasons, is
Sure.
it gets exhausting coming out over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
You have to come out every time you meet someone. Every time I'm in public and I am visibly trans is maybe a stretch, but like I present in a very openly and specifically feminine way in my dress and all those things. And
people can have questions.
Essentially have to come out to every.
Yeah.
Yes. And people will still be like, hey, dude, hey, man, hey. And now, dude, whatever. I don't really care if it's a friend, but like if someone's leading with, hey, man, and I'm dressed and presenting in a very openly feminine way, there is a part of my back of my head that's like, man, do I have to do the conversation again, or do I just let it roll off my back? Yeah. And I think that there is a vision from probably really mostly centrist liberals where they think they're going to get like just canceled for calling a they, them, a he, him or something.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing where they're having that battle in their head. Racists are having that battle in their head every minute of the day, where they're constantly thinking about how they can address their racism, either to the target of their racism or someone they view as an ally of their racism. I've probably said, boy, we're getting into some intense political shit right now.
That's okay.
We'll get into some weird,
it's actually like weirdly
a
little
esoteric bit vampire stuff.
I know.
Later.
It is also like a little bit relevant to the second issue that we're going to cover today. So
it is,
like, I think that it's really, that's partly why it's on our mind, because we just read these and then we're talking about them. So,
what was the last thing I was fucking saying about,
racists are always trying to.
Racists are always, I've said this before on the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me of racism.
Well, I try.
Before on the podcast,
sometimes you forget and you're like, oh, we solved it. And I'm like, no, actually, George.
Yeah. I was born in the Northeast in Massachusetts.
Right. Where we solved
when
it.
I was, yes. Yeah. And no one in Massachusetts is a racist at all.
Democratic state.
That's right. It's the number one. So I moved to the deep South. I live in Georgia and have for most of my life at this point. And when you are a white person in Georgia, I lived in Stone Mountain for my very formative years, middle school, high school, within sight of the carvings of Confederate soldiers right by my high school.
Yeah, that shit's crazy. When you told me about that, I was like, that's crazy.
Looming over a predominantly black community and a largely black and non-white work staff. They have a quote unquote antebellum plantation, which, if you know what that word means, it means before the war, a pre-war plantation, meaning an era, a slavery age plantation that you visit as a school child. Anyway, when you grow up in that environment as a white person, you are constantly entreated into racism. You are constantly invited by other white people to take part in racism. And a lot of the time, other white people will look at you and assume that because you're white, you harbor the same hatred that they do. It's, the term microaggression, I think, is very useful a lot of the time.
Sure.
Sometimes, like many terms like that, social terms, it gets twisted. It's like therapy speak gets misused, whatever.
Sure.
But there is also kind of like micro invitations.
There's an assumption that you look like me, so you must think like me.
There is, just as there is coded talk, there is code switching is a term that's loaded for white people, but there is an equivalent version of whiteness where people, if you are in a certain crowd of only white people, they will just say something that is abhorrent, and you are then forced to either agree, silently offer no resistance, which is tacitly allowing it, or offer up a comment and resist it and risk some sort of ostracization or even at times physical altercation. There were times when I was in high school where I remember a very specific time. I was in high school. I used to go to the skating rink every weekend. We'd go to the skating rink every Friday, me and my buds. And there was a dude that I went to high school with who was there. I was maybe in 10th grade. And he wasn't a dude that I was super close friends with, but like we hung out sometimes in social situations, and he and I were both going over to the snack bar to get some fucking fries or whatever. And there were two, black teenagers in front of us. And as we walk up, he goes, "Out of the way, Enslers." And I was just like,
whoa.
If you talk about fight, fright, or freeze, I just froze. And I just turned around and walked away because I didn't know what to do. I was like, what the fuck? And so it is a real thing where someone will just do that. That dude probably thought I was going to be like, hey, hell yeah, that was pretty cool. And it's just like, it's the opposite. But anyway, this has been racismography and white privilegeography with Pierce and George.
I mean, listen, I think it is something that is important to talk about because it, as much as people want to say that like it's 2026, we're so progressive, it's like, no, we're really not. I'm not saying that it's like,
well, we've taken a big backslide in the last 10 years. I was listening to this podcast that I won't name that I got really annoyed with because they were talking about stuff that happened in the social strata in 2016. And they were all just saying like, who gives a shit about like there aren't enough trans people on TV or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, 10 years ago, yeah, I know that's bull. There's so much worse things to worry about now than like representation on TV necessarily.
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, we thought we were at that point. We thought we were at the point in that conversation where we could start being like, well, we kind of have the broad stuff covered in a lot of ways. Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
But in a way that wound up with the backlash of the worst people who wanted to say the worst things being like, now you want to take away my gamer words?
Yeah, I mean, look, even right now in 2026, DC has not put out a black lead ongoing title.
I just saw that. Was that Comics Beat that published that?
In almost 1,200 days. 1,200 days? That is 3 years.
I think that speaks to a larger problem in the comic industry, both in terms of representation and not even just representation, but opportunity for creators to tell those stories and creators who are non-white, black people, native and indigenous people. The push for that was there at one point. And now it seems like it's faded back to like, well, we just got to have the same, group of mostly white people writing and editing all this stuff. And there are exceptions. I'm not going to try and like categorize every person or every creator because there are many creators working in this industry and working to put out their best and most representative work who are not given the same opportunities that people were in the industry not that long ago.
Sure. But I do think about the fact that every time that there does seem to be some initiative or some movement towards, look, DC's been trying to do Milestone again or bring Milestone back in some form for 15 years at this point. We've gotten art. We've gotten a book here and there. They were in the DC universe for a while.
Right.
They're in Young Justice, those characters like Icon
fans for it and everything. They just can't speak to that audience.
Static Shock.
They can't figure out how to speak to that audience.
And
I won't deign to say that I know better.
No, listen, I'm not going to solve that problem. I don't know how to solve it. I do think we talk about the ultimate or the absolute universe quite a bit on this podcast as a sort of like, wow, this is this really big moment for DC. And it does feel like a thing that would be really powerful in that line would be to throw an absolute Static Shock in.
Oh, that'd be great.
It would be really cool. or something like that, something to that effect. I think it's the right place for it, but I know that the absolute Green Lantern is black. I was talking about mainline DC books.
Right. What I was going to say is I want to clarify when I say they don't know how to speak to that audience. I mean the corporate structure of DC. They have continuously put, black creators and even many of the original Milestone creators on those characters, but I feel like they
trot them out when they want to make a show of it.
Publishing boxes that are not sustainable the way that they deserve to be. And so when I say they don't know how to speak to that audience, I'm not saying the creators. I'm saying because the creators probably know how to speak to their own audience better than anyone, but the corporate structure is flailing at trying to be perceived. And this is true of not just comics, but entertainment in general. Mm-hmm. The corporate structure of entertainment is flailing to be perceived as both progressive and where people can, we tell real stories with real people, and also to just increasingly shut out anyone but the same cadre of white Hollywood that has really been the core of things for decades.
A great example of this was our recent Oscar race between Sinners and One Battle After Another. The way that those movies were talked about. I'm not trying to bring up that movie again. I know
Sinners. You know what? I'll have a different conversation. Sinners was a fucking fantastic movie,
right? But
and deserved all that praise.
100%. But all I'm saying is that if you look at the media coverage about those movies, One Battle After Another didn't make its money back. Or if it did, it barely broke even. Whereas but the
Sinners made a cultural impact in a way that wasn't just people knowing that film people liked the movie. I always remember every time I think about that movie, One Battle After Another, I saw this Instagram reel. I cannot, from some comedy group. I wish I could remember the name of the group, where it was the topic was John Bernthal core. And they kept just saying John Bernthal shit like, fuck, I love getting bitten by dogs. And all this crazy shit. And one of them just goes, One Battle After Another was a good movie. And that's what I think every time. Anyway, we don't have to reopen that. I just think that's a funny joke.
But to speak to the corporate structure of entertainment, right? The discussions about those movies were One Battle After Another. Wow, what a triumphant film that it's not going to make its money back at the box office and there's something wrong there. And then Sinners was great and it was successful and they were didn't really make that much money though. Is the $1 billion movie dead? And it's whoa. Why was this original IP supposed to be? Because listen, One Battle After Another is still an adapted screenplay. That is based on a book, sort of. In so many ways,
takes some cues and
Sinners is brand new IP. Maybe we'll get a couple more or something in that universe in the future. That's cool.
I hope it just is what it is.
I think we will, only because it has an unprecedented deal for Ryan Coogler, which is that after 20 or 25 years, he gets the rights back wholesale.
Yeah.
So that's when we will get something new. Is when he goes.
Maybe so.
Bring it on, baby. Let's go.
We'll see. If Ryan Coogler wanted to do something more with it, I would trust him. It's his shit. And
totally.
like you said, I hate using the term it's fresh IP because I don't think
me too.
Should be. I know. But it is that is the 2026 way to say it is a newer idea or whatever. Rather than it is a departure from the current culture, which seems to be trying to capture millennial nostalgia and sell it to our children.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with a friend or I've had this conversation with a few friends, and also I had it with my cousin recently about how I was you can't, everything that you like can't just be the thing you liked when you were 8. Sometimes you need to just challenge yourself to engage with something new. It can be something new to you. It doesn't have to be something new that came out now. It could be
but listen to have you never music. Watch a new thing or read a new thing.
Or if you love Star Wars, go watch some Kurosawa movies. understand where the thing you like came from, because that will make you a smarter, more well-rounded person who it gives the things that you love greater depth, right? And like that is something that I think is really valuable and is missed through the this will sound again boomer ass shit, but like the TikTokification of fucking media.
Well, there is an attention span issue. And the thing is, what's very interesting about your point, which I absolutely agree with, that is the nature of passion, is that as we get into these 2 issues of Spawn, we're going to find out exactly what having a wide breadth of knowledge will add to a reading experience. Because, as I said, boy, I know that you were maybe a little lukewarm, but we're getting into George's special interest corner tonight.
I know that you're going to help me like these more. So I'm lukewarm on them, mostly for the storytelling form of the first one. And then I think the second one's just kind of fine. But I know that you're going to illuminate. You're going to be a light in a dark tunnel for me reading this. So
we will discuss bellicosity. We will discuss lycanthropy.
Yeah, as we've discussed before, my intention is never to go in and be like, this shit sucks, because that's not a fun podcast to listen to or to make. And then in this case, once you started texting me like, hey, there's some stuff in here that I know, and I was like, great, I can't wait. I get to be on the podcast and listen to it before I listen to it again, I guess, when I edit. So this will be fun for me. But this is the point, right? I will get to learn a whole bunch of stuff, and then it will become relevant to me at some unknown point in the future. And I'll be like, my friend George taught me that, because I do.
You're going to be a trivia, and there's going to be a Slumdog Millionaire moment where you're like, oh, I remember this because of this bullshit podcast I do.
Yeah, the answer
it's not bullshit at all. That's right. I mean, it often is. Monkey Man, baby.
Green Knight.
Green Knight, baby. Great movies, both. I mean, Monkey Man lit me up.
Monkey Man's
sick. Skins. Monkey Man.
Skins. It's crazy to look at the cast of Skins and be like, oh.
Skins First Class. The first class of Skins. Yep. Fucking so good. I was so hooked on
Daniel
that.
Kaluuya,
Nicholas Hoult immediately became my favorite actor. That's why I knew that I wanted him to be Lex Luthor. But also the second cast,
because he's evil Ferris Bueller.
Yes.
It's
because he is young Lex Luthor in that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It rules.
So back to my segue.
Sorry.
It's okay. Pierce, when you're ready, why don't you go ahead and hit me with those credits for Spawn 178.
Hell yeah. This is Spawn number 178, Dead Man Walking. Story by David Hine, pencils by Brian Haberlin, inks by Rodell Nora. It's a new name for us so far. Colors by Andy Troy and Ian Hannon. Lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Production by Francis Takanega and Diana Sanson. Assistant editor, Francis Takanega. Cover by Brian Haberlin and Gerard Van Dyke, who we very much liked a couple of. It's a cool cover, actually, with Spawn, and he's got these hands coming at him. It's pretty cool, like nice, cool painted cover. I wish we would get to see that team up a lot more of Van Dyke and Haberlin, because they're really great.
Yeah, they were a great complementary team.
Yeah, and this one is dedicated to the memory of Stéphane Peru.
Okay.
Who I am looking up as a comic book artist.
Stéphane Urkel.
No. French colorist who did some stuff for Marvel. Sadly passed in February of 2008.
Well, R.I.P.
So, yeah. Anyway. Did some Ultimate X-Men and Strangers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway.
All right.
Died at 26. That's so sad.
Oh, that sucks.
So sorry.
Well,
anyway.
yeah, R.I.P. Woof. Boy. Okay. Spawn number 178 is a pretty interesting issue to me because in a way it is a palindrome. And there are some interesting aspects of modern horror that are reflected here that predate the things that I am thinking of that embody these concepts. So I'll get into some of it at the end, but most of this issue takes place from a person perspective of the villain, who is a vampire, which will become apparent very quickly. And we see almost the entire issue through their eyes, almost like a first person game where you see their hands out in front of you. And it's interesting because it really reminds me of something like In a Violent Manner. Did you see that?
Yeah. That's the one
Where
from
it's
the
from the
perspective of the killer.
of the slasher killer, and it's very slow and plodding, and the killer's just kind of dragging stuff through the woods. It reminds me of that same kind of concept, where here we are getting the literal perspective of the villain in a way that we rarely even get this perspective for the main character or a hero or really any comic book character, because you're usually using that character's visual construction and body language to partially tell the story. Here, we're just getting the hands. And, Haberlin and team do a great hand job throughout this issue. Great hand stuff.
I actually really like the kind of twist on our typical opening page of a Spawn comic, where we do get a lot of text. It's extremely text heavy, but it's against a black background. And I actually like it as its own kind of piece for this sort of one shot. If you want to do the word balloon, I do kind of want to read it. But it says...
It's just an entirely, just for context,
just a black
page with the text arranged in a column going down. Really wonderful sort of... like you said, it's almost
jarring in a way that is like a little unsettling.
Especially in a Spawn comic that has traditionally often opened in a very bombastic way. Anyway, go ahead, because I also like the caption quite a bit.
Is this it? Is this death? Everything falling away, everything I knew, everything I am, it all slips through my grasp. What am I? Who am I? All I know is that I've longed for this emptiness, this peace. I'm falling towards oblivion.
Maggots. They're the worst, dude. The maggots. I can't count the number of times I've been showered with the damn things when I unzip a bag.
That voice. Why does it fill me with such dread? What is this place? Am I in hell?
So that narration will continue, that first person sort of narration will continue throughout the book, and it will continue as both an internal monologue of the first person character that we are following, as well as their speech. And so we're getting a fully interior view of this character. I actually think it's a really interesting storytelling device. Before the podcast, you were telling me one of the things that you felt disconnected from is the storytelling through this as a result, and sort of the dynamic.
On my first read through, it took me like an extra read through to I needed to kind of know where we were landing to kind of go back and be like, okay, I kind of get this a little bit better, because on my first read through, the first person nature of it wasn't totally clear to me. And we kind of see that on these, like the very first panel, we get like an eye opening, but like, that's like a movie eye opening. Like your eyes don't open that way.
Usually you'd get that flutter in the movie as well to show you
that an eye is opening.
It's shorthand that we're seeing it through an eyelid. And what we're seeing is a morgue where a mortuary technician is training a new person, teaching them how to prepare a body for a funeral. And they're kind of being irreverent about it, not in a like disgusting way, in a relatable way. You know what I mean? It's kind of the
work,
it's the horror movie intro, kind of like dudes being bros, just kind of talking shit at their job. And as they're kind of fucking around, something happens behind them, which is a body that had bled out. They say, oh no, he was bled out. He was cold. Starts to rise, and we see our first glimpse of the POV character's hands, and they're kind of typical like
hands.
Vampire white pale hands with long black nails. And The next thing we see on the next page is sort of a view of the empty morgue, as off panel we hear the sounds of this undead creature presumably attacking and feeding, and we get the caption, "They shouldn't have run." Meanwhile, we see the figure that we've been seeing with Mammon for some time now. We're about to learn who this is, this vampire. And the vampire addresses our POV character as Severin. She goes on to explain, she says, "Do you think you could run from me?" She explains that Severin is a vampire that is thousands of years old. We'll get into more of the specifics of that in a second. And that he's been trying to die for so long, but he's so old that none of the ways to kill a vampire work on him. He can't be beheaded.
Yeah.
He maybe even sunlight.
And his wife is the editor-in-chief of DC. So
that's right. That's exactly right. Yes. Great. Good stuff. That's a joke for us. And so she at first, Severin doesn't remember who he is. She takes him to the bathroom, shows him the mirror. He starts to remember, and she explains that what he is a Rikolikos, which she says is an ancient name for the undead, and your birthplace in Macedonia, the creatures that evolved into the first vampires. Now that's interesting. Rikolikos we'll get into in just a second, because there's some interesting etymology around there that connects directly to this character in a very cool way. We're about to get into George's esotericism corner. So Severin starts to remember. He remembers back to Macedonia, which, for those of you who don't know, is now a part of Greece that was part of the collective of ancient kingdoms that would become Greece, which is where Alexander the Great was from. He was a Macedonian king. And they have their own very interesting kind of parallel culture to like mainland Greece and stuff. It's very interesting history. He remembers that after the sickness took him, he awoke and drank the blood of his beloved bride Adelpha. He remembers the slaughter in Rome. They ran in packs, the stench of blood and fire, the screams of the dying. He remembers Lucian and Daciana, leaders of the true Rikolikos, who withdrew from the sight of men. The name Daciana is interesting because I don't think it's necessarily mythological. I could be wrong, but it is the name of a character in AMC's Interview with the Vampire Show.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I looked that name up because I didn't know that one. Okay, so they talk about like historical, theoretical vampires, Vlad Tepes, of course, aka Draculia, and then Elizabeth Bathory. We get into Elizabeth Bathory. Countess Elizabeth Bathory was, of course, a noblewoman who was rumored to bathe in the blood of virgins to preserve her skin. Probably that's not true. What actually probably was true is that she was extremely cruel to peasants and to her servants. And so she was demonized in history for not bathing in their blood, but not giving a shit if she spilled it.
Question for you. These Virikolikos?
Virikolikos.
Is it typical in vampire lore for there to be like a precursor to vampires? Like a sort of like proto vampire?
It depends. I mean, so vampire lore, the lore of undead, this is a perfect time to get into the Virikolikos. The lore of undead and vampirism is incredibly amorphous throughout history. We have evidence that cultures, basically as far back as culture has existed, believed in some version of life after death, or life in death, or undeath, or a return from death on some level, be it through divinity, earthly means, sometimes through the means of a curse or bad omens. So there are truly dozens, hundreds even, of proto-vampires, precursor vampires, creatures that can be equated to vampires. I'll go ahead and say right now, on my shelf of like weird books, I have probably 4 or 5 different like vampire encyclopedia and books on the history of vampirism. I am a pre-Twilight vampire gay. From way back in the high school days.
An Anne Rice
and
gay?
that is Okay, so funny story about Anne Rice. I do love Interview with the Vampire, the movie, and I was so excited when the book The Vampire Armand came out when I was in like ninth grade, I think, because I love that character from the movie, and I hadn't had a chance to like read much of her books yet. Um, and so I picked it up at Chapter 11 Books, where I used to go play Magic, and
Nice.
I got through like the first chunk, and most of it was about the pedophilic relationship between Armand and his like slave master. And I was like, this makes me feel so weird. I'm 14. Like,
Yeah. Should have just
so
stuck to the Magic the Gathering vampires.
that's right. The Sanger vampires and the
Mhm.
Sanger dynasty, as I recall. From Ice
Edgar
Age.
Markov,
That's
etc.,
right, all
etc.
those.
Olivia.
Oh, sure. Olivia. We all know Olivia. I just remember Baron Sanger from
Yes. Yeah. That's
either that
also
was that Dark Ages, I think, was where the
I think
Sanger
it's Dark
started to
Ages.
show
Yeah.
up. Not a beloved set back in the day.
No, still not
Kind of
really
fell,
a
I think,
beloved
between
set.
Antiquities and Ice Age,
And Ice
somewhere in
Age
there,
is
and one of the best of all time.
well, the cards not all the cards have aged well. I'll say that.
Yeah, sure. That's fair. I once had a complete set of Ice Age.
I love the art.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Anyway, at the time it was peak. So back to vampires. Speaking of vampires and role playing, if you look at Vampire the Masquerade, they take the kind of tack of like all vampires are one thing and they go back to the first vampire. Something that is common in some versions of mythology, and I believe this is actually from I cannot I believe it is appears in both some apocryphal Catholic texts and also some apocryphal Judaic texts that that Judas, who betrayed Jesus Christ,
Mhm. Was a
was
vampire?
a vampire in some way or became an undead that was cursed to wander the earth. It's an obscure mythology that is not necessarily like believed. It is obscure, but some years ago it gained relevance in popular culture, and the interpretation of Judas as a vampire because of this idea that he was cursed
Oh, this is
because of
the
his
Book of Agula. The Book of
yeah.
Agula,
It's
written in
written by
840.
Dr. Agula, of course.
The band from Long Island, the hardcore band from Long Island. Yeah, the Book of Agula, written in the year 843 A.D. by a Catholic monk named Ade, states that God punished Judas by restoring his life after he hanged himself. Ade writes that God, in his fury, condemned Judas to walk the earth until his final days. He would fear the sun and be cursed to roam the land in darkness. He would never again know the comfort of death and would be damned only by feeding on the blood of living humans for eternity.
Yep, there you go. So but the thing is, okay, so to jump ahead, there's also the idea in Vampire the Masquerade, the idea is that Cain is the first vampire. Cain is in Cain and Abel because he's cursed by, which is interesting because he is cursed with immortality and Spawn and becomes Cog. So there's a lot of that. But to jump ahead or back or whatever, really, because the
Sideways.
concept of vampires as we know it, like blood drinking, like that kind of thing, all the main vampire lore sort of comes from around the time of Dracula, and in that kind of 150 year span, really, because that is when people started collecting this lore and these tidbits of like, oh, garlic, nails, coffins, biting, blood, drinking, and sort of to coalesce them into a concept of one creature. So what's interesting is, okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into who this vampire woman is. She is Morana, a vampire who was chosen by Mammon to as a child to grow into the like best vampire. There will come a child, as we heard 100 issues ago. Morana is from Slavic folklore. I want to say maybe around, yeah, we'll just say Slavic because I don't know the exact. I know some geographic shit we'll get into. But she is sort of a goddess of life and death and rebirth. She usually represents the idea of the death of winter, moving into the rebirth of spring. So it's kind of interesting that name is used here for this vampire, because vampires are, of course, sort of a form of cursed rebirth. But what's also interesting about that is the term vrikolikos, which is Greek, generally Greek, comes likely from the term virkolak, which is a Slavic term, specifically, I believe, from Belgium and eastward, that means werewolf. And so it's interesting because vampires and werewolves are actually more closely just one thing, considered just one kind of thing in a lot of ways. Some cultures considered werewolves to be humans who willingly took on the form of wolves as a form of magic. There are also
like a druid kind of,
in a way, or just like more like there is the idea of witches and vampires transubstantiating or
well, yeah, all vampires are
transmuting.
That.
Yes, of course, transmuting into animals. And that, even in Dracula himself turns into a wolf. There was this sort of connection, and there is a historical connection to that in the term virkolek, because it starts with virk, which is a Slavic form of the term varg, which is Norwegian and Germanic. In Germanic, it's pronounced varg, but it's warg versus varg, which means wolf, or in some cases, more accurately, watchdog. And so it speaks to this idea that, first off, I think it's interesting, the connection between the Slavic sort of folklore of the Virkolak and the Slavic folklore of Morana through the lens of the Virkolikos. And I think Varg is also, it's a term for an outlaw in a lot of ways, in more modern usages or more later usages.
Is the use of
and that's where Varg Vikernes gets his name, from Burzum, and fuck that guy, he's a fascist.
Yeah, fuck Burzum. But
yeah, they suck.
Is this kind of Hine trying to say like the Virkolikos, the Virkolikos, Jesus? Is this Hine trying to say that the Virkolikos are sort of maybe the proto, like super being, in a way that like maybe vampires and werewolves and all these kind of evil things
I think it's trying to draw kind of through line
from the same thing.
We've been getting a lot of historical shit through these issues, where we're visiting different times, and I think it's a pretty common sort of modern vampire conception. I think it's Hine trying to tap into something that's a little more individualistic, or not individualistic, more unique than the typical like Eastern European vampire.
Sure.
The other interesting thing about Morana on that note is they talk about going through Rome. Morana, it is historically theorized that the name Morana, who is a goddess of life, death, rebirth, has a connection to the word Mor, M-O-R, which is a Proto-Indo-European term that evolved into like Moors, many different declensions of the same sort of root for the word death in Latin in particular, which then went down into Romance languages and stuff. But there is a theory that because of that, there may be a connection between Morana and the Roman god Mars, who was, of course, the patron of Rome, the god of war, because Mars may also come from that same sort of have a etymological connection.
Got it.
Which is interesting because Mars does have a female aspect named Nerayo, who is basically Mars as a woman.
Many such cases.
I love Nerayo Altor. So anyway, yeah, there's just so much cool shit here, and that's we should probably stop it there because it's already been a long
Sure.
time.
No, I mean, I think it's good context that these things don't come from nowhere, that you can pull on. We were kind of talking about this earlier, right? It's really important to know where things come from to kind of give depth to them.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you just have a surface level understanding and you're like, all right. Credit to Hine. I think that the script does a good job of trying to place a lot of this stuff, but
Hmm.
we
It
are,
does a quick job of telling this like
yeah,
eons long history of vampires.
yeah,
I will say they also they come to Simon Pure. They say they watched in contempt as Simon Pure led his blood sucking hordes in service to heaven. I was surprised they don't bring up Sanskar at all because like pretty
yeah.
classic historical vampire. I really thought Morana, who is turning out to be Morana, might have some connection to Sanskar, but then I remembered he basically only comes back in like 30, 50, 100 more issues or something. So
Yeah.
Mammon delivers Morana, who is a vampire baby who grows into a vampire adult, which is crazy. But, you know, Severin is saying, I'm sick of this life. I'm sick of the killing. I want an end to my unlife. And, she kind of teases him for his pathetic attempts to die. And she says, I saw you, Severin. I watched you build your guillotine. I heard you muttering your wretched prayers. Who did you pray to? Jehovah? Satan? The ancient gods of your youth? And yet you still live. And she goes on to offer Severin a bargain. If he will do one last vampire mission, come out of retirement for one last
Thought I was
big
out.
heist,
I thought I was out, and they pull me back in.
she will. Mammon has agreed to, through her, grant him his one desire, that he truly face oblivion, that he
Right.
actually get to die. And he says, what would you have me do? And she says, you have to bite a hellspawn. By the way, we haven't touched on the art, but it's fucking great. All of this looks
The
great.
art's really strong all the way around. I think Rodell Nora is a good match for Haberlin's pencils.
Yes, and
Really
he
just
does
strong, strong
also
work.
the colorist. I can't remember the name in this issue.
Is
Anyway, it's all very
Andy Troy and
complimentary.
Ian
Andy
Hannon.
Troy, thank you.
Yeah.
Does a great job with Morana, especially showing just enough detail, but also leaving her fully cloaked in shadow. Like it splits a good difference. And I love these panels of her face where she says, you have to bite a hellspawn. And you just get that close up of her teeth.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
awesome.
and then she says, I'll take you to him, and reaches out and touches him. And
I
the
love this
way that
wibbly
everything
wobbly.
distorts, it looks
Yeah, because
great. It
they're
looks
they're
great.
like moving through time and space.
So they
Sick.
arrive at, yes, exactly. They're doing the teleport.
Yeah.
They arrive at Chikatilo Imports, where Spawn is hanging out. Now, Andre Chikatilo, the Ripper of Rostov, one of the worst serial killers of all time. Just Google it.
Yeah.
Severin asked if says something about, I thought you were Memmon's favorite disciple to Morana, and she says, I'm not his disciple. I'm far more than that, but you'll never know if you go in there and infect that hellspawn with your disease. So we see him go inside. I love this panel of him like reaching through the chains as
Cool.
Spawn is talking to Mark.
I like
think
Spawn's
this is
interior
actually,
decoration, which is just, I don't know, hang some chains from the ceiling. That's
he's got
fine.
one small lantern in there for Mark and Nix. I actually really like this because we get this exposition of, we now see that Al has explained everything to Mark. We don't have to have pages of Al being like, here's everything that happened. We have Mark reacting to it because we know all this, and we have known all this, and their conversation is great. Mark is like, so what if I had been the one to kill that weasel, that the animal that you killed that kind of set you on this path? What if would I be the hellspawn now? And Alan's like, no, it would always have been me because you could never have done that. That's not who you are.
Yeah.
And as they're having this conversation, this vampire comes out of the chains, runs at them, and I love Mark is like, holy shit, what is that? And the vampire says, forgive my appearance. Regrettably, I'm not able to see my reflection, but apparently I'm not looking my best. And So he swipes at Mark, grabs Nix by the throat, who tries to cast a spell against him, and it doesn't work. And then we get this great panel of Spawn lunging. No, you don't touch her, you filth. I love the way Haberlin has evolved into the way his face, as his Spawn face, has come together.
Yeah. Also,
And
the
we get
colors are
this,
doing a lot more here. They've been pretty desaturated this entire time. As we've been watching a dead person kind of come back to life,
and it's a morgue. It had a very Saw kind of quality.
Oh, it's like the fluorescent
which,
blue lights of a morgue in a way.
absolutely.
That's just like bleh. And here, because there's a little bit more color in general between Mark and Spawn's red cape and things, still pretty desaturated versus what we've seen in the past. But the greens,
now that the action is
really,
kicking in,
the greens really pop here.
That bottom panel of the fang holes in Spawn's shoulder,
awesome.
That just looks awesome. I love green slime. So Spawn catches one in the shoulder, catches the fangs in the shoulder. Mark unloads. I love this bottom panel, kablam, where you see the bullet leaving his gun. And he's just like, I just blew half that thing's head off and it's still alive. This particular page here reminds me of one of my favorite pages from the, I think, early issues of John Ostrander's Suicide Squad, where Deadshot is fighting Batman. It's the one where Batman confronts Amanda Waller. There's this great panel, or this great sequence of like 4 panels where you see Deadshot, like his scope, and you see Batman come at him, and then he's out of vision, and then the next panel is him, and then the final panel is his fist, like in. Anyway, awesome. It's great.
I mean, but John Ostrander's Suicide Squad, excellent work.
Oh, so good. Spawn is laying on the ground, and Mark and Nix are trying to help him, but Mark is distracted because he sees Morana upstairs, and Spawn is writhing on the ground. He says he's been bitten by vampires before, true, but it never felt like this. And he says it feels like hellfire coursing through his veins. So Morana takes Severin's hand and she says, listen to him howl. Severin, she says, congratulations, Severin. That wasn't so hard, was it? And he asks, what have I done to him? Why do you take such pleasure in his pain? She kind of brushes him off. She says, I have my reasons. And she says, here's your reward, Mammon's gift to you. And he says, this will kill me. And she repeats the language earlier when she enticed him. She says, as I promised, you will never see another sunrise. Which vampires don't usually see the sunrise anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of a trick.
She says, aren't you curious what will happen? No qualms about the afterlife. And he basically says, no. How could hell be any worse? Essentially, as Bad Religion once said. He says, my life has been awful. This eternity is horrifying. This is hell on earth. So how could hell be worse? And she says, from what I understand, it will be a hell of your own making. So he takes this orb from her, this glowing golden orb, and out from it stretches this creeping darkness that just crawls over him. And we get I love this moment. He says, I remember now. Oh, God, help me. I remember. We turn the page and we get the exact same page as the book started with. It's that palindrome of him once again waking up on the morgue. Now, again, I said there was another big horror influence, modern horror thing that I thought this reminded me of. Exactly. No, I was going to say, well, technically, I guess, but what I was going to say is The Haunting of Hill House. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Well, I'm going to discuss a spoiler for it.
That's fine. It's a TV show? I'll never watch it.
Okay. It's like a limited series on Netflix. It's fucking great. It is incredibly emotionally devastating. One of the most emotionally devastating things about it, and listeners, skip ahead maybe a little bit if you haven't seen it and don't want to be spoiled. Yeah. One of the big climaxes is that it's about all these siblings who grow up in this sort of Amityville type house. And it is about how the haunting, or what they believe to be the haunting and the trauma of that, runs throughout their lives, affects them as adults, their relationships as adults. One of the siblings is a younger woman who struggles with self-harm and ideations of self-harm. And throughout the series, there is this her name is Nell. There is this question of what is going to happen with Nell. And her family is worried about her. She is kind of in the throes of psychosis. Everyone thinks Nell's going to hurt herself. And so part of the reason is Nell has this, they each have sort of their own ghost that follows them and haunts them. And Nell's ghost is the hanging lady, or the screaming lady. And she has visions that we see throughout the series as a child of this woman haunting her, just floating over her, screaming at her. This is a particularly harrowing scene where Nell as a child is laying on this couch and the screaming woman just appears above her. And it's like this terrifying jump scare that sets the stage for all this stuff. Anyway, the big climax with Nell is she returns to the house where all the ghosts are, and winds up, because she is enchanted and because she struggles with thoughts of self-harm, being tricked into taking her own life by hanging. And
so we find out that it's her.
The most that as she dies, she falls backwards through her whole life. And every time that she as a child or a younger person saw the screaming lady, it was her as she died, reliving her own life and haunting herself. And it's such an intensely visceral thing that haunts me so deeply. And like, it reminds me of this in a way where there's that Twilight Zone ending of like, oh God, I am my own misfortune.
Yeah. I mean, also too, like the very end of this is after we get that opening monologue kind of again, we get the end. Never.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does kind of put a button on that like, this is what Severin was meant to live out. This is their curse forever. Mm-hmm. They will never see, like you said, they will never see the sunrise because they're only going to be reliving this day for the rest of their lives forever.
For their on life, whatever it is. Yeah. So. Now, one thing I will say is I think this is a very effective ending. I think it really is. I do somewhat wonder though, let me ask you a question. Do you miss having the, like, maybe a punchline of seeing Severin on like maybe the page before this? Like if we got to finally see what he looks like.
I guess so. I think all right, if I was reading this book when it came out, I would kind of think like, oh, this is going to come back. I will see this character from a different perspective at some point.
And I guess I'm assuming we're not, but I mean,
I don't think we are, but
you know, and to me, I waffled on it myself, and I think I come down the same way as you. Well, maybe the same way as you. I think what I come down on is, it's kind of more effective that he's just a faceless pawn, because that's all he is, and that's all he's been his entire existence.
And it's a good. Is it a bit of foreshadowing for Al? Al's most recent realization is that he must die. And here we see a character who longs for death as well and doesn't get it and is involved with Mammon and has been manipulated. And so, you know, I do think that this works as a really effective one shot that, like, I don't really love the first person, like hardcore Henry Spawn issue.
It's a swing though.
It's a swing. I just don't I think it's actually really effective when Severin's not looking at the thing that's happening. So we're getting this like kind of off kilter, like, what are we looking at? But like stuff's kind of happening off panel. That feels very realistic. I think the pacing of the issue is really, really good. I think it's funny that like there's like a handful of panels that are like a corner of a room, like at a Dutch angle that you're like, oh right, because they're like getting up from the gurney.
But I think that speaks to Haberlin's care as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. Haberlin becoming a favorite around these parts. And I do think that this is meant to serve as like a bit of a warning to the reader. Like Al wants this now. But here's what happens to other people in Al's situation. Here's what's happened in the past. And I think we're meant to hold that as we kind of hurtle towards the next stage
Well,
of
and
his
exactly.
character
Well, and Al
development.
is also a pawn of Mammon. I'm
Right.
sorry I keep talking over you.
No,
I'm
you're
just
fine.
eager.
No, it's fine.
Uh, I think someone's going to listen to this episode and be like, fuck that. Jesus Christ.
What's funny is like people will probably listen to this and be like, Pierce doesn't really talk that much. And it's mostly because you have a lot to add. And it's a lot of me going, yeah, that sounds cool. So, because like I said early on, I'm learning right along with the listeners. So, one thing is these episodes, they're off the top of the dome, baby. That we
Yeah,
don't
we're
have an
just
outline.
going.
We just talk.
No,
So,
we just go. As you can tell from our increasingly long intros.
yeah.
So speaking of which, we'll get into Spawn number 179, but I think it also is meant to be a reflection of Al here.
Right.
Because Al to Mammon is also simply a pawn.
Yeah.
He is an engineered being, basically, to take on the role of the ultimate hellspawn. And as Al says to Mark says, well, what does Mammon want? He didn't allow you to save the earth and remake it out of the goodness of his heart. And Al's like, no, he wanted to wipe the slate clean because whatever comes next, this is only just beginning.
Yeah.
So I think it reflects that. I think in a way it is a deft sort of storytelling conceit, and I see why they went for it. Honestly, there are a lot of times when I'd rather read a swing, like something that takes that kind of artistic swing to have a point of view, literally, I guess, than just kind of go through the motions a little bit all the time.
I think that Hine has, I think he really likes circling back and circling back and circling back on themes and being like, are you getting it yet? Are you understanding this? It's going to be important. I'm going to expand this, but I need you to have this foundation of these. You have to understand how deep the roots go before I can kind of move forward. And I think that can be a little bit frustrating for readers sometimes if you're reading month to month and you're like, I spent I spent $4, $3 on this. All right, I guess,
Yeah.
And it's partly because we're experiencing, we've said this before, we're experiencing this book in a much different form than folks who were reading it at the time. We are essentially binging it, and we're always getting the context of like what we recorded like a couple days ago. So like we have the context of the last couple issues kind of fresh in our minds while we're reading these. I sometimes, if I really like a couple issues, I just read it. I just keep going, because I'm like, oh, yeah, this is awesome. So, in some cases we have the context of what's coming next to sort of inform the thing that we're seeing and let us understand what the writer's going for in terms of the thematic elements. Because I don't think that Hine is actually that interested in Spawn as a superhero. I think that that's become pretty clear. I think that he is much more interested in Spawn as a metaphor at this stage. And I am curious to know what the end game, which we'll get to in a few episodes, but like what the planned end game is for him. What is the statement he's looking to make with the character? When we talk about great runs on characters, we do usually find that creators are not trying to self-insert, but they are trying to say something with the character or make you recognize something about them or make you feel something about them. I think that great runs typically have some thesis statement. I'll go back to like Grant Morrison on Batman, right? Weirdly, the statement on Batman is kind of Batman forever.
Right. Well,
it's
all these things are actually part of Batman.
Right.
But I want to somehow reconcile that.
And that is so interesting because it is the thing that Grant does after X-Men, where Emma Frost pointedly says, you can't kill an idea. Their Batman run is that thought continued, right? And so like writers are, I think, always when writers are really doing their job, I do think that they are looking to explore an idea through the character that they're using. And I think in this case, I think that Hine is really exploring something about what is fate, what is like destiny,
And what is
and what,
design?
yeah, and further, what does an ending mean? Like what do we do this all for? Right?
Right.
For Spawn, it's really hard because he can't die, so it never ends. And so what does that even mean for him to try to find an ending? And so
Right.
we're
And
repeatedly
Mammon's trying to
shown.
encourage him to seek it. And what we're learning here in this issue also is perhaps if he does try to find the will to die, that will just ensnare him into Mammon's clutches inescapably.
Is this also a trap, right?
Right.
Is this his curse that he is doomed to be manipulated forever and for all time? Is he Sisyphusian in that way, just constantly pushing? He has been a Sisyphusian character in the past, right? Always pushing the rock up the hill for Wanda, never really
Well,
recognizing that he was never going to get it.
and speaking of that, let's get right into the credits for Spawn number 179.
All right, Spawn number 179. Tom McFarlane Image Comics present War Spawn. Story by David Hine, pencils by Mike Mayhew, colors by
Hell
Andy
yeah.
Troy, lettering by Tom Warzikowski, production by Francis Takanega, assistant editor Francis Takanega, cover by Mike Mayhew and Andy Troy. And this one is dedicated to the memory of Michael Turner.
Oh man, that's tough.
A great talent, Michael
You know,
Turner.
of all that era of like those post-image, like second wave images or image kind of creators, I always had a real soft spot for Michael Turner. You know,
Yeah, me too.
some of his Justice League covers and Flash covers and stuff.
Superman,
Really
Batman,
like those. Yeah, of course. So
Fathom.
R.I.P. A talent gone far too soon who I think would have evolved far beyond what we had already seen from him.
He felt like he was definitely much more on of like the image guys of that era, that he was on more of a Jim Lee-esque track where you could feel, I think you could feel in his art that like he was gonna
Well, he had the
grow out.
whole, he had Aspen, he had his whole imprint and everything,
Yeah.
which I don't know if they're still going, but were for many years. They might still have a small presence, but they were doing Fathom and all that stuff for a really long time.
Yeah,
So yeah,
but also, but I was just gonna say, like his art felt like it was going to sort of break out of the shackles of its bad habits that you
yeah,
saw kind of
absolutely.
early in his career, especially because he was somebody that, as the industry continued to change and he got different jobs, he was able to sort of
He was transitioning from a late 90s artist to a mid 2000s artist
a weird place that you
very
can
well.
really see it, I think, is in the variant covers he did for Civil War. Where you start to go
Yeah,
like, oh, right, this guy can fucking draw. And
right.
those start, I mean, there's a few images from those, like your feelings about Civil War notwithstanding, but like there are a few images from that run that really got me back into monthly comics in a really significant way that I think about all the time. There's a scratchiness and rawness to his work, that his pencil and line work, that is just really, really great. So anyway, love Michael Turner. Check out his shit. It rules. Died at 37. Really
I know, fucking
fucking
R.I.P.
sad.
So
But
great artists lost too soon. Mike Waringo, one of my all-time favorites, died so
me too.
young. God, what a
Yeah.
fucking amazing talent. Anyway, Mike Mayhew, also great, and I really like him on this issue. This is another
Yeah.
one and done issue, War Spawn. And now we're gonna get right into it. First off, I want to say, if you as a reader go and read this issue, put on some fucking Iron Maiden. Immediately want you to be listening to Aces High, because we open on a squadron of World War I flying aces barreling down with machine gun fire on an unknown subject, barreling down towards us. Tack, tack, tack. And in the last panel of 4 panels, as they get closer, I love the way Mayhew manages to show you the movement of their formation in just a couple panels. we see in the last panel that the pilot is a Spawn. But on the next page, we learn that his target is also a Spawn because they're at war in hell, fighting each other.
Do you think that the
Now,
pilot's a Spawn? I think he's just a skeleton guy.
well, maybe he is, but I mean, maybe he's not a Spawn, but he is like a
Like a
zombie or an
demon or
undead
zombie or
something.
whatever.
He
Yeah.
looked like a Spawn to me, but I guess he has red eyes, not green. So, could be but anyway, he's an undead fighting pilot guy in hell, probably a Nazi. Well, I guess that would have been pre-Nazi, but fuck them all. The Spawn here has this very interesting sort of like first half of the 20th century bucket helmet kind of Maxim gun, like
the Gatling gun fucking is crazy.
Hell yeah, it is. I mean, that is a trench gun.
That's some like Jesse Ventura in Predator ass shit.
Fuck yeah. I mean, that's what was killing people over the top of trenches. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Pretty accurate rendering of of the barrel, at least. I mean, they're not handheld. And this is the Spawn version, but it's kind of combined with the shotgun. It's pretty sick. Anyway, yeah, it gives a whole war is hell monologue talking about how, like, I like this part. Every mother, father, loving wife who has waited for the telegram, the letter, the knock on the door to announce that one more brave soldier has fallen, they don't need to be told that war is hell. And for those fallen soldiers, at least the war is over. Death brings an end. But for this warrior, there is no death, no end, no relief. For him, war is truly an everlasting hell. We'll find out about this guy. At his command, the soldiers rise once more from their foxholes. We see these British doughboy troops, like just a whole like battalion coming up out of the graves, like they're coming up over the trench.
Also, we're doing some classic like late 2000s widescreen storytelling here.
This is some post Brian Hitch art right here.
Oh,
and it's great. I mean, Mayhew, I have a good soft spot for Mayhew. His work on Daredevil not that long ago, pretty good. And there is the way that he is usually colored, I think, because of his like line art quality, there is an almost painterly texture to it. And here, especially after that last issue where the colors were almost a little austere and washed out, we are on a violent like landscape of bombs and explosions,
reds
and volcanoes and just fire and hellish war. I love this double page spread here of
it's awesome.
War Spawn wrapped in barbed wire firing his machine gun.
I would own this if I could.
Like, I would, War Spawn, God. World War I Spawn. We're about to meet World War I Spawn, and we're getting into World War I. Welcome to George's Special Interest Corner Part 2. I won't even get into all of World War I because, baby, if I start talking about the Schlieffen Plan, this will be a 5-hour-long podcast. And so, actually, I was just going to give an early recommendation of Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
Oh, hell yeah. The
Furious Blueprint for Armageddon tells the story of World War I and is one of the best historical accounts of anything I've ever heard.
There you go. There's another bit of David Hine, I think, being really good at his job. I really love the sort of captioning here. At his command, they rise once more from the foxholes, shambling forwards across this misbegotten no man's land. How many times, how long? Time here is not measured in days or years. Back and forth they go, battling over and over for the same patch of torn, bleeding earth in this endless dress rehearsal for Armageddon. God.
Well, a lot of people saw World War I truly as the start of Armageddon because that was where modern weaponry was developed. Armored vehicles, machine guns as used by troops on both sides. The waves of the human wave attacks. I think it's important to note here also that David Hine is a British writer because a lot of this particular corner of World War I, first off, the Brits were central in World War I, particularly in France. The history of how they got there, I won't even get into, but the British Army going to France was one of the biggest moments in the onset of World War I, because it showed a unified Western front where for generations France and England fucking hated each other, warred over the same territory, on and on and on themselves. So the other thing about this is he talks about the history of British buddy regiments and companion regiments, which is a true thing that was created to encourage groups of young men to sign up. They would enlist people at the pub, and they would sell people on this idea that you and all your friends are going to go to war, and you're going to have an adventure together, and you're going to come home more bonded than ever, more manly than ever, true British soldiers, true British citizens of the greatest empire in the world. And they were sold a bill of goods. They talk about this here. David Hine talks about it. Whole villages of young men wiped out because they were bought into this idea of heroism and valor. There is a history in Britain in particular of the, I forget, is it the, shit, I can't remember the flower. It might be the Posy movement or the Daisy movement. But there was, I can't remember which flower it is. There was a regiment of sort of unofficial young women who would shame British men into joining the army by pinning these flowers on them to show that they were fucking cowards. And it was
Is
like
it
an
the
incredibly...
Pansy Division?
No, but that is a different thing. Great band, by the way.
Great band. I just the way you're describing it, I was like, well, this would make sense. If you've obviously this, I
mean, maybe it is Pansy Division. I'll have to check.
Is it not?
I think that's
I feel like
else.
it is. Whatever. Gallipoli, the Peter Weir film, but about World War I, about the unsuccessful.
No, Pansy Division is just the name of the band. That's what I thought. Pansy Division is a combination of being called Pansy and actually
and loving math.
Division. Panzer Division, which is a German tank division. So it's essentially just about being militantly gay because they were a band that started at a time when there weren't many openly gay bands.
Yeah.
There you go.
But like Gallipoli is what you're talking about. It's a movie about these guys going to war happily. They're happy to do it. They're going on
millions and millions of British people,
and
they
kind of get there, and they're just sort of, that's it. Like it's not going to work. It doesn't. It's not this. Again, we got very political at the beginning of the show because I think having read this, we are watching our current events, and we're just sort of I
want to say, relating back to the beginning of the show, I will keep this very brief.
Yeah.
The German philosophy of World War I and how they're going to win it was World War I had been brewing for a long time. It was a powder keg waiting for someone to throw a match. Particularly the German Empire was waiting for this to happen, and they were recently unified. They had for the first time, a strong national identity as Germans. Mm-hmm. And they decided to take the opportunity, the death of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and the political unrest, to launch their plan to conquer Europe. Their idea was a two-front war. Their plan was to go conquer France as fast as possible, basically send their entire force to France except for a sort of a complement of troops, a token force at the Russian border. The idea was to blitz France so fast that they wouldn't see it coming because they were going to go through Belgium. That's its own whole thing. They thought they wouldn't meet resistance because Belgium is neutral. Mm-hmm. It ended in this morass that that didn't end until the end of the war. The war in France never ended until armistice was called in France.
Right.
Because when you think you're going to alpha Chad your way into it, that isn't what happens. And the Germans were obsessed with logistics. They knew how many bullets they would need. They knew how many steps it would take a soldier in a marching formation. Anyway, we're so not talking about this comic.
I know, but it's not because we don't like it. It's because it has brought up a bunch of other stuff. And
so we're going to get back to the comic.
Yeah,
we're going to visit the Battle of the Somme, which, as the comic will note, is the single bloodiest day in military history, not counting like fucking, atomic. Actually, I think even counting the bloodiest battle, let's put it that way.
Sure.
Million, like hundreds of thousands of people died. The Somme is still, they talk about no man's land in this, and that's true because the area between the British/French, the Allied forces, and the German forces was just ever shifting slightly back and forward with no side really gaining ground, constantly being pummeled and pummeled and pummeled with more bombs than you can possibly conceive.
Trench warfare is just brutal. Like, it is just like, it's crazy that more people didn't die.
Even today, that entire region of France, the entire strip of land, is uninhabitable by people. Nature has started to reclaim it and there are animals there, but the heavy metals and the toxic metals that are in the bombs, not even as a method of weapons, but that are in the bombs because of their construction, not to mention the chemical weapons, mustard gas and all this shit that was deployed over and over. That land is poisonous. It is truly
Crazy.
Dead land. And so that exists today. It's crazy. So they're at the Battle of the Somme, and we're going to find out that there is one soldier in particular here who we are following, Captain Thomas Coram. We're going to get into his history a little bit, and it will become important. Thomas Coram is the son of an aristocrat, recently an adult, who is in love with the black servant of this aristocrat. Now, she is an American woman who was brought to England by this man as an employee, not as an enslaved person, because by this time slavery was no longer legal in England. That doesn't mean they didn't profit off of it. The entire English Navy, the pride of their sailing fleet and all their boats, would not have existed without cotton from plantations in the southern United States.
To be clear, also, slavery abolished in the United States at this point as well. We're in 1896.
Yes, that's true. But yes, good point. But my point being, this woman is not enslaved by this guy's father, who is
Correct.
we learn Amaretto. Jesus fucking Christ. My cat loves fighting like string and stuff, but she doesn't want to play with toys. She only wants to fight my headphone cable and stuff. Yeah, she's crazy. She's fucking crazy. She is 3 years old and she is very much an adolescent cat. Anyway, we learned that this guy's father is sort of egalitarian, even more than most people of his day. There are, we catch up with Thomas at one of his first times joining his father and the other adult men for their sort of
smoking club, their cigars,
their conversation,
and whiskey,
their salon. And so
I gotta say,
talking about,
I'm gonna pause you real quick. The rendering on these pages is absolutely gorgeous.
I should not be breezing over it because Mayhew et al. Are fucking so good and such a good fit for this issue. It gives it that prestigious like war movie look, like you were talking about.
Yeah, it feels like a memory. Is what it just really feels like.
It is the glazed golden haze of
sort
the
of
memory
gauzy,
of this person who we will come to learn
especially
is struggling to hold on to this part of his life.
Yeah, especially because we've done away with traditional comic book panels here. We're not; these things are sort of bleeding together. They're sort of existing not in montage because there are scenes, but it is extremely caption heavy.
Panels
it's just
without borders almost,
but also using the elements of the image to create borders where there aren't.
It's fucking great.
It's really great. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that like I think pushes this book forward. It feels like Angel Medina was 150 issues ago. Compared to something like this.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're well into a different era of comics at this point, basically. So also the openness of the art really lets the lots of text breathe in a way that it might not otherwise. there is some language here that, it's tough the way they talk about it, but it is accurate to how these people would have talked, and it is not used in a violent way. This is just a frank look at how things were in 1896
Yeah.
before Thomas went off to war. Because when we see him in war, it's 1916, which is, sort of the middle of World War One. And he's in love with his father's black maidservant, Selma. And he tells her all these things that he loves her. And she asks him, so if you love me, will you walk with me? You don't even have to hold my hand, but you walk down the street with me? And he just can't do it.
Yeah.
Then later he's in this salon with his father and his friends, and they're discussing the future of black people in England. One of them says, well, of course they shouldn't be slaves, but they're still not equal to us.
Yeah.
And then his father, Thomas's father, sort of is like, well, I mean, they're human beings. We'll have to have them in society as equals. But the way he says it and the way the conversation is going, Thomas is like, do you mean like horses or dogs? Like,
yeah, I love
in a
this.
sarcastic way, like
Yeah.
calling him out as these people are to be used
Yeah,
is
I
the
love-
only way they can conceive of them.
Yeah, I love this caption that says, his father's liberalism is as weak as his mother's tea. Thomas breaks his silence at last, drawling with unaccustomed sarcasm. I like it, and
The rendering of him in this chair too.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a nice little, like, yeah, he's not brave with the woman he loves, but he is trying.
This next page of them in the rain with her
So
and their baby, his illegitimate child, this drawing of Selma is just
gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Truly breathtaking.
The rain on his, like, dripping off his nose, the way that her clothes are rendered, the folds in her bonnet, like, wow.
She looks radiant and is covered from the rain, and it's all falling on his shoulders. And he even says, I love this. He promises to look after her. He says he can't accept the child. He is not, his liberalism is as weak as his father's ultimately. Yeah. He cannot bring himself to rise beyond his station. And she walks away, but she says, are you proposing to me, when he promises to look after her? And he just hangs his head in shame. And he says she looks so proud, and all he can feel is shame. And it's just, that's it. He sends them money, but he doesn't see his son again until 18 years later. He goes to visit them on their farm and meets the son, but it's concealed as, he's a family friend.
And we get to see his son, who's grown older now. His skin much lighter than his mother's, and I really enjoy the facial expression work here, because
Mike Mayhew has a mastery of portraiture that is unique in Spawn so far.
Yeah. Because it's a page that, for all intents and purposes, like, I shouldn't be that impressed by. It is three figures against basically a white background. It is Selma being like, fuck, I hope you don't realize. It is Michael, her son, judging what is going on here. Being,
he clearly knows.
There's
he
something.
Clearly gets it.
Yeah, like, I know that somebody's not telling me something, and it is Thomas sheepish, almost.
Yeah. Well, and then he's on leave from the army on a rare visit home from the front, and he and Selma, they make love, as it says, and it's true. Like, they have a passion for each other, and it says that Thomas just aches for the years that could have been if he had only had the courage. And it kind of says, maybe he came back because of facing death. But we find out that, much like his father, Michael, drawn by the charm and the draw of adventure in the war and all the ways that young men are being pressured to go basically just throw themselves in front of machine guns for almost nothing, he joins the army. And
Yeah.
while Selma is like, well, you won't have to go fight because the British will not send black troops to the front, which is also interesting. I'll mention something about that in a minute. He says, well, I'm light skinned enough that they didn't question me when I said I was white. And this look of just visceral pain on Selma's face as she's like,
It's really
you can
incredible.
see, that she is so. This is a complicated thing to say, but she looks like she is full of pain that her son's whiteness is now going to kill him,
Yeah.
just as her lover's whiteness kept him away. And she fears that whiteness will again take her entire family. And now, interestingly enough, Black American troops who went to the Eastern Front, or sorry, the Western Front in France, found a sort of egalitarian reality that was vastly different from the United States. There, they were not segregated socially or publicly, so they would mingle with white troops from other countries, even though they
Mm.
were segregated from white American troops in many cases. And while it wasn't like there was no racism, they were allowed to live a life that was vastly different. And a lot of them didn't want to come home. A lot of them came home with a deeper understanding of what civil rights could mean. World War I changed the entire history of Earth. The world would not be what it is today if not for World War I and cigarettes. And that's not a lie.
No,
Cigarettes
I
invented
know.
the entire modern advertising industry, and the entire cigarettes were not popular before World War I. They were
Right.
seen as a degenerate way of smoking till a guy invented a way to automate, like a rolling machine, and upped his production from like 1,000 cigarettes a month to 10,000 cigarettes a month. Had to create his name was Duke. I can't remember his first name. He had to invent a way to sell this product, and so he sold it to the Allied forces as rations, because
Mm.
cigarettes were so much easier to just give out as rations, and that's how everyone got addicted to smoking cigarettes.
Well, that and also Don Draper came up with like a really good ad for Lucky Strike. They're
Yeah, he
toasted.
sure did. Uh,
This panel at the top of Thomas. I love the captioning here.
that is Michael. She tells him if Thomas promises to look after Michael, and she says if anything happens to him, don't come back.
Well, that first
Oh,
panel.
you're right. That first
is
panel
Thomas.
is Thomas. Yes. Sorry. Yes. And then it's paralleled in the panel below,
Oh,
looking
the
at how
parallel's
youthful.
incredible.
Dude,
The
it's so
parallel's
good. This
incredible.
art is
Mwah.
it. Oh, it's so good for this, because also there is a realism to this
Yeah.
that is totally detached from the hell of where Warspawn is.
I think also too, it is that it's Hine trying to treat this very real thing with the
there is
respect.
a Norman Rockwell quality to
Yes,
this.
100%. But it is trying to treat this very real, very tragic event with the level of respect that it requires. It actually adds. It is in and of itself is a tragedy, but it is a personal tragedy as well, on a level that like we don't often get to see in a book that frequently impales people, cuts them in half, dismembers them.
It's so different.
It's so
It's
different.
so different. This, we see the soldiers running out of the trenches across the bombed landscape, and it says, then all hell lets loose. And these soldiers are just torn apart by machine gun fire, because that's what it is. They're all getting exploded. And Thomas looks over, and just as there's an explosion next to him, and he realizes that Michael is caught in it. And he goes, oh, Michael! Oh no, Michael! And we see Michael eviscerated, torn apart, his guts
are
hanging
out.
out.
His
And
leg
this is
is
such
like
an intense
destroyed.
scene. Michael, listen to me, says Thomas as he leans over him. And Michael just says, don't worry, Captain. I know who you are. I knew the first time I saw you. You ran away from us all those years. Were you so ashamed of me? And Thomas tries to apologize, but Michael says, go to hell, you bloody coward. And then he kind of loses consciousness. But Mammon walks up dressed like M. Bison Like straight up.
He really is just like M. Bison. Especially because
Like,
he's
just-
like, what? He's like, what uniform is that? And he's like, let's say neutral, shall we?
Yeah, it is basically just the white palette swap of M. Bison. It's great, which of course that's based on, like all kinds of military outfits. So he says, "My name's Mammon, Lord Mammon," actually, as he shoots a German soldier coming to finish them off. And Mammon says, "You could save him," as he's like prodding the German soldier.
Great.
And he says, "Your son's not dead. The spark of life is still in them. Selma would want that, wouldn't she?" And he looks like he's part of the Holy Roman Empire at this time.
Yeah.
He's got the like fucking Habsburg jaw and mutton chops. That's great.
Christoph Waltz for Mammon.
Here his chin isn't right, but Christoph Waltz would be pretty good. It's because he has the Habsburg jaw, because he looks like the last era of this type of aristocrat in Europe. So Mammon basically just says, there's no time for questions. A life for a life, a soul for a soul, your life for Michael's. One dies, one lives, as simple as that. And Michael doesn't hesitate. I love this panel of Thomas just saying yes.
By the way,
he doesn't hesitate.
Do you love the cane?
Oh, yes, it's great.
The cane rules with the Malbolgia head.
Yes, and then he's got the Malbolgia epaulets too.
So cool.
Because we're learning that he's kind of Malbolgia's recruiter, and he's using that for his own ends, as we'll find out very soon as we close in on the end of this issue. So Mammon is just like, good, I should warn you, this is going to sting a little because you have to take his wounds onto your body. And suddenly Thomas's body explodes. His guts are all sprawled over the place. Awesome. And Michael manages to make his way through the unending hail of bullets and bombs and just absolute nightmarish conditions, leaving Thomas behind. It says that the weather was good, but he died there choking on rain. His last memory of his mortal life is of rain falling cool upon his face and the scent of new mown hay. We wind up in hell with Thomas facing Malbolgia, and we get this fucking great rendering of Malbolgia.
Really cool.
Like amorphous, fiery demon that looks great. And I love the way we see his kind of the close-up of his face sort of blending into Thomas's agony as his agony as he becomes a spawn. And
Mayhew does a really great thing here too, where we can kind of see Thomas's like reaction. We can see Mammon's reaction. These kind of like half headshots kind of blending into the background a little bit, just meant to give us a hint of how they're feeling, because we're not getting that panel. It's really, really great work. It is. I think that this is the kind of thing that is really tough for a lot of artists to do, because it breaks the form so much.
Right.
But wow.
Oh, it's so good. Honestly, if you don't read any other Spawn from this era, and I recommend you do, just read this issue. It's just for Mike Mayhew's art. It's so fucking good. And I don't mean to discount the colorists and inkers as well, because the whole package is absolutely gorgeous. And here we get to Spawn. We find out that until Armageddon, all that War Spawn will remember is war, war, war. With every bullet he fires, with every fight he undertakes, he will forget more and more of his humanity. We get this great fucking splash page of him just using all kinds of weapons like hooks and chains and swords and bayonets and pistols, just blowing people away. Meanwhile, we cut back to Michael, and we find out that Michael, who was injured in the war, was sent home on a discharge because he was no longer able to fight. He was injured. And so Michael and his mother, Selma, return to America, where Michael becomes a prominent jazz trumpet player, meets a singer who he falls in love with. They have a great life.
The trumpet.
Everything is good for them. The trumpet. And Mammon watches and waits. Thomas is a magnificent hellspawn, but he's not the greatest. The greatest is yet to come, and he knows how to bide his time. And we get this moment at the end where we learn that Thomas, or that Michael, I'm sorry, that Thomas is the great grandfather, I think, or great grandfather, actually. I can't
The
remember.
great grandfather.
Great grandfather of a baby now, because because Michael, I'm sorry, Thomas and Michael are such white guy names, just boring, generic, like they're just the most like
Well, we watched
Thomas
Michael.
and Michael are so interchangeable in my head as names.
Yeah.
So we see Michael raise his family. He has
We
children.
see a
His
familiar
children.
face amongst the crowd there as well.
Yes, we do. We do. We see one familiar face, one certain
Blind lady.
Granny Blake.
Yeah.
Granny Blake, because we find out that Michael is the grandfather of a young girl, Wanda. And this final page, we get the great close-up of Warspawn's face. We get Mammon's face. He looks very Sacha Baron Cohen here, actually.
Oh my god, thank you. I had kind of tabled that for a second in the casting.
Interesting that he played Mephisto, that he's now Mephisto in the MCU.
That's true. Mephisto is something of Mammon himself.
Yeah. But yeah, I just love the rendering of Michael here. And of course, baby Wanda is maybe the best looking baby anyone has ever drawn in Spawn. Like, just straight up the most human looking baby of all time in a comic book.
Maybe in comics ever.
Yeah, straight up. Oh boy, and that's where we end on Spawn 180. We've gotten this episode's gotten a little long in the tooth, but I mean, look, there's so much tied up in this.
We haven't even gotten to Spawn 180.
Well, and sorry,
that's where we got to Spawn 179.
That's right. So, but we haven't even gotten there, and there's so much that's. David Hine is putting so much into this, especially that World War I issue. You can feel we've kind of done final thoughts separately on both issues. Yeah. So we'll get into this. There is definitely an inherent Britishness to David Hine's writing of this issue in particular, and of this particular moment in history and time, because it is the great patriotic war of the British. Even before World War II, it was like a matter of national pride. It's really, in many ways, sort of the what's the word I'm looking for? Not apex, but the rise, the first peak of British nationalism. I mean, you talk about British nationalism. If you're talking about Iron Maiden, fucking Bruce Dickinson is absolutely a British nationalist and is deeply obsessed with history, especially World War I. They have songs and songs and songs about it, but it's just so interesting, and it's such a topic. World War II gets a lot of attention, but to me, World War I is so much more fascinating because it is the end of the old world and the birth of what will become the modern world. It is the dawn of technological advances far beyond what has come in a successive sort of time period before. But yeah, so I found these issues, especially that second issue, endlessly fascinating because it's essentially like an episode of Downton Abbey with Spawn in it.
Yeah, I think that I like the second one more than the first one. Like I said, I think the storytelling, the first personness of the first issue is like a little... I mean, it's cute, right? A vampire can't see their own reflection, so we're going to have the first person kind of perspective not show you who the character looks like. Yeah, that's fine, I guess. I think that there's great work by the art team, and I think that I really like Hine playing with structure. I think Hine is a very underrated writer.
I think he's a pretty good Spawn writer at this point.
Like both of these issues play that out, or excuse me, I think that both of these issues really bear that out because these are researched and deep, not philosophically deep, but like there are layers to these stories, and Hine is very good at being like, I need to keep kind of pounding the same kind of points and themes home so that when I blow this all up, it's really going to mean something. When something changes, you're going to feel it because I showed you why it matters.
That might also have been our most gut-wrenching, like, Spawn one-off origin yet. Like, truly. There was not a, like, badass sort of, like, moment for them where it's like, you remember the grandfather and granddaughter who died fighting or whatever. There's nothing like that. It is an inglorious moment. Maybe even more gut-wrenching than the baby.
I was going to say the other one that I would directly compare this to, and I think that this episode these issues were much better than the one I'm going to bring up, is that one with the werewolf family. Remember that one? That was like bad. The Holguin issue that we were like, what is this? Not great. It wasn't structured well. It didn't tell us more about Spawn. It didn't tell us more even about like who Al Simmons is, kind of. It was a Monster of the Week story that didn't...
It felt like an inventory issue in a way.
Yeah, it wasn't additive in any way. These, on some level, yeah, you could slot them in kind of anywhere, right? You could kind of slot them in anywhere and it would kind of feel the same. They feel much more additive. I think that Hine's been like preparing us for this kind of thing more and more and more with like the gunslinger stuff and the sort of like secret journal and here are your parents and here's your secret brother that nobody, or your brothers that nobody knew about. You know, like, I think that he is interested in that sort of like, we'll say it again, we've said it before, the Claremontian soap opera X-Men reveal of a thing. But at the same time, that is what long form comics trades in often as a way to on some level produce empathy, right? Roger Ebert said movies are machines that produce empathy, right? When they're good. And I think in the same way, comics are the same. And I think that adding these layers of depth to Al Simmons' story without him having to be the focus point, because as much as I love Al, and we've been with him for so long now, and I love that, like, he is a frustrating character because he's limited. And doing this kind of retcon that goes backwards and lets us read into the things that have happened already. Great retcons bring new context to things you've already read.
Yes.
And
that's they are expansive.
Do. Yeah. And that's what these do. And so, you know, I was very happy to get the additional context from you, my friend, as I'm sure many of our listeners were as well.
Boy, 2 hours of context.
I mean, hey, that's
sometimes how it goes.
That's what it's about. But, you know, I'm excited for more. You know, again, I'm excited for more. I remain constantly excited for more. So,
well, that's what I always say: is the best comics make me want to keep reading comics.
Hell yeah! So, listen, before we go, George, do you have any recommendations for our listeners?
You know, if you are interested in any of the shit that I talked about, especially the history stuff, everyone knows in addition to being a vampire gay, I'm a history gay. You should check out, I recommended Dan Carlin's Blueprint for Armageddon from Hardcore History. Dan and Carlin, kind of a like moderate liberal, whatever the fuck guy, but his historical context of storytelling is fantastic. But what I will also recommend, and this will be my final recommendation of the episode, is the book Proto by Laura Spinney. Proto, How One Ancient Language Went Global. It is about the history of the Proto-Indo-European language. I'd mentioned that more, the word that comes from that. And it's very interesting. Even if you're not interested in language and etymology or whatever, it is the study of language, and the history of language is really the study of the spread and interaction of humanity. And it is such a fascinating historical book. And I learned a lot from it, and I can definitely recommend it. Proto by Laura Spinney.
Awesome. I have an easy one. Today, as we're recording, it's April 30th, which means it is the 30th anniversary of the incredible Text is the Reason, the only Text is the Reason studio record, Do You Know Who You Are? Which feels like a Spawn title in a way.
Yeah, for sure it does.
If you're a fan of like Husker Du and Jawbox and that sort of like 90s, 80s post-hardcore, 90s indie rock emo thing.
Text is the Reason is fantastic.
I love them, especially also if you like JFK conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
weirdly,
their name of course comes from the Misfits song Bullet.
Yep. So
ride, Donnie, ride. That's all I can say.
But yeah, highly recommend that record. I was listening to it today. Interestingly, I was listening to it today, and while I was listening to it, a friend of mine I hadn't spoken to in a bit texted me and was like, "Oh, I just saw Thursday, and Norm from Text is the Reason is playing in Thursday now, and I thought of you." And I was like, "I'm listening to Text is the Reason right now." So
that's great.
Just a nice bit of kismet.
There you go.
Cool. Listen, if you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Really helps the show. You might have noticed a couple weeks ago there was like an ad for like a day, and then I got rid of it. We don't do ads. We don't like doing ads.
We didn't like it.
We didn't like it. We tried it. We didn't like it. I thought it sucked. So we got rid of it. We don't do ads. We don't advertise ourselves except on other podcasts and, on the internet sometimes. So tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, repost our stuff from Instagram, whatever. That's kind of the only social media we use with any regularity. But you can also send us an email, spawnographypod@gmail.com, if you want to let us know that the episodes are getting too long or that we're stupid or that our recommendations are dumb. But you could also just be nice, and you can say nice things. And also we'll read your letter on the air as we have before.
I could use the pick me up.
Yeah, hey, it's always fun. And hey, also if you have a job for George, if you need
if you have need of a comic book, the best to ever do it.
True, honestly. Listen, Claremont went on a Marstonian run with X-Men, and so
I keep telling myself that, honestly.
Yeah, it's a good one. But I'm using Marstonian instead of Claremontian whenever talking about long running things. So
there we go. I appreciate that. Legend unto my own kind.
But before we go, George, for God so loved the world,
He gave His only begotten Spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.
Spawnography!
Spawnography is recorded in Athens, Georgia, and Queens, New York. It's produced by me, Pierce Lyden. Our theme music and logo were composed by George Marston. Episodes come out every Monday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe. You can find us on social media at Spawnography or at SpawnographyPod. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can do so at spawnographypod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time, see you later, Hellspawn.